Hello, my name is Georgette Yakman, and I'm the founder of STEAM Education. I'd like to thank you for being interested in getting STEAM certified through my program. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the overview of this course, a few points on why STEAM came about, and introductions in general. We'll definitely get into more of this all later in other videos, but this is just a brief introductory video. The videos themselves are going to cover the theory on why STEAM came about, the practice of STEAM, and some projects to get you comfortable with teaching STEAM. After each video, I ask for feedback. At the end, we'll go over how to do a STEAM lesson plan, and I'll ask you to write a STEAM lesson plan based on a topic that you're interested in. And when we are both happy with that STEAM lesson plan, you will qualify to be a STEAM certified educator. A little bit about the why of STEAM, and again, we will certainly cover this in depth more later. First of all, STEAM is about literacy across the broad spectrum of the subjects, not just literacy in the sense of reading and writing. Also, it's going to be functional literacy. We live in a world now where people expect things to be fun. Think about your average computer programming office. They now sit in bean bags and have chalkboards. Very few places are still sticking to cubicles and desks. Our younger generations expect more point-and-click fun, and we need to adapt to that in the classroom because the business world is also certainly adapting to that. There's silo cooperation. If you're not familiar with the term of silos, those are the individual subjects. So in the past, a science teacher only taught science. Your discipline base is still very important. It's the critical element that you teach, and you need to cover the depth. But I'm going to show you how to cover the breadth. Where does your topic blend into other topics, and how are you going to point that out to the students? That's critical to STEAM. STEAM is STEM plus the humanities. We all deal with people, and we all are people, especially our minorities and our girls are shying away from the STEM fields because they don't feel that personal connection. I'm going to show you how to add the humanities to STEM and beef it up, not dumb it down. STEAM is not making STEM pretty. STEAM is adding the full spectrum of the humanities and how an individual relates to the STEM fields. We're also going to talk about sustainability. Sustainability in the ecological way, as well as in the sustainability of your individual STEAM program. One of the things I'd first like to introduce you to is using pipe cleaners in your classroom. They're not just for little kids anymore. Pipe cleaners are great teaching instruments for so many different ways. As I talk and I give direct instruction to my students, I know that they're not always going to want to look at my face or the notes that I have on the board, and at times, instead of looking out the window, I would prefer for them to be looking at what I'm doing that I don't necessarily need to be paying a lot of attention to, but that what I'm doing is related to what we're learning about. So right now, you and I are learning about people and teaching STEAM. So I'm making a little person, and maybe if you have a pipe cleaner at your house, you might be following making the little person. But if you give your students the pipe cleaners and they make what you're making, then they have a tangible connection. Some kids are going to doodle. Some kids are going to use the pipe cleaner, and they're going to remember, if they keep this in their notebook or in a little pouch, what they were making when you covered that topic. Another very nice thing about the pipe cleaners is the kids can tap them. They don't make noise. They have a structural integrity, and they have a soft tactileness to them. So in multiple different ways of learning, the kids are making different connections to the learning topic. It can be very simple, like my little person or the tic-tac-toe board, or it can be very advanced, like that DNA structure if you're studying genetics. I'd like to show you one extension of pipe cleaners. Let's say you're learning about crystalline structures in your science class. So you can put this little pipe cleaner in a borax solution and get crystals out of it. There are so many different ways. Different kids can put them together in different combinations, and it becomes a meaningful, tangible item to what you're directly teaching about, where you don't have to have a very specific project to cover what you're doing at that particular point in time. Let's talk a little bit about introductions. We have all been to the grocery store and the kids say to you, "Oh, you eat?" Yes, we are humans too, but our kids don't always see us that way. For the next 180 days, your students and you are primary influences on each other. We want our children to realize that approximately 80% of students will stay in the locality in which they were educated. They need to own that locality, and we need to see them as individuals on how they're going to grow their corner of the world to be a major influence on that, and also how that part of the world interrelates with global society. So remember, we are educating the future society to get, make, sell, buy, and dispose of its products, tangible and theoretical. I'd like to take a moment to talk about how I introduce myself to a STEAM class and how they, as students, introduce themselves to you. When they first come in, on every single desk, especially at the kindergarten, at the second grade and up level, because at the kindergarten through second grade, you're going to have to interview them. So once they are literate and can write, there's a survey on every desk. When they come in, they are asked, what do they expect to do in this class? Most kids will tell you worksheets. What don't they want to do in this class is the next question. The kids will give you the same answer, worksheets. That's what they're used to getting in school. You are going to get to blow their minds with STEAM. We still cover worksheets, we still do direct learning, but we also do and make, and kids love doing and making. Then we're going to ask them a question about what does the school system have to do to make their learning experience great? Kids don't often think about the fact that the school system is the one that decides what goes into the buildings, what textbooks get used, what desks get chosen. We need to teach them the importance of their voice and being able to understand that not just the teacher influences their classroom, but the school board and the administrators, and that they have a voice in helping decide things that happen. The next thing I'm going to ask them on this survey is, what do they know about the teacher? What are their preconceived notions about who you are? My absolute favorite answer ever, some kid said, I hear she hits students with pots and pans. So I read this that evening, and the next day I went in and I took a pot in and I started washing it, and I went up to the kid's desk and I slammed it down on the desk, and the kid's eyes popped open, and I said, I hear that you think I hit kids with pots and pans. And he said, oh no, I just want to see if you're going to read it. So if you're going to give these kids a survey and ask them about them, you need to tell them when you're going to get a chance to read them, and you need to read them and provide direct feedback. That was a test by that student, and I passed that test. Make sure you do too. After that, we're going to ask them, what will they do in this class to be successful? And before you cover your classroom guidelines, that student is probably going to tell you what I mostly hear from my students. Do their work and behave. So that's something that you can keep a hold of and bring back to them and say, you know what you need to do. Where's the disconnect on what's happening with you now? They've told you, you get to turn it back on them. It's very important to ask them, what is their best subject and why? What do they connect with at school? And what is the point that they connect on that topic? And then what is their worst subject and why? Most boys will tell you that their best subject is PE. And almost across the board, 65% of students on average will tell me that their least favorite subject is mathematics and that they don't like it because it disconnects to reality. So one of the greatest things about STEAM is we help show those students those connections from mathematics to reality. Then we ask them what types of hobbies and clubs that they're interested in or do outside of class. If they are really into sports, you know they're probably a kinesthetic learner. If they've been in the scouting community, you know those kids can follow directions and have done projects as well. So it's critical to find out what types of things they do outside of school that you can maybe connect to them on to bring them into the academic realm through their particular interest outside of the academic realm. Then we ask them, what do they plan to do after they graduate? Most high school seniors will tell you walk off the stage and go to their party. But we want to know, do they plan to go military? Do they plan to go to college? Do they plan to go to trade school? Are they going to get a job? All of those are valid answers, but they're rather vague. And I'm going to tell you very specifically how we direct them through coming back to a more specific answer. We then go into what type of house do they want to live in the future? Please don't ask them what type of house they live in now. We don't need any current stigmas. But if they answer, I want to take over my family farm, or my son will tell you he wants to live in a condo because he never wants to mow my lawn again, it tells you a lot about what that student sees that is important to them now and where they see themselves as being important in the future and their comfort zone of where they want to live. Then you go back and ask them what they want to do for a career. Because maybe they said military, but maybe they only said military because they want to get the GI Bill to be able to go to college, and that's not a career. Maybe they said military because they do want to be career military. Maybe they said they want to go to college. Most students up until high school don't realize you have to pick a very specific major in a college. So going to college is not like going to high school, and that helps draw you out into those students really thinking specifically, what college, why, let me fit my needs best to where I want to go. Then there's a very specific question that I ask them with wording that I find critical. What do the adults that they live with do for careers or hobbies? Please use adults. Don't use parents and don't use guardians. Not every kid has parents, and guardian sounds very clinical, but everybody lives with an adult. And what do these people do for careers or hobbies? Because some parents don't have careers, but they still have valid hobbies, and that lets you know what that student is exposed to at the house and who you might be able to connect with to become and be a speaker in your classroom or help you figure out how to do a project. It's critical to find out what background and what adults the students' parents and guardians have that they live with. And then the last question, what's the most impressive thing they feel they've ever made? And some kids will tell you they've never made anything. Well, they've probably made a meal or a snack at some point. That's certainly a valid thing to make. But let them feel comfortable that they already do and make things, and you're just going to show them how to do more. So while they're filling out that survey, I show them 10 slides about myself, and I suggest you do the same. And then when you're done, print those out and hang them near your desk so the kids throughout the year are regularly reminded you are a human being. And they're going to have more connections to you as a person and also more forgiveness for you as a person being the head of their classroom. In your classroom, when you hang those slides up about yourself, also realize your desk becomes a personal display of your home life. Make sure that your students have a place in the classroom, whether you have 25 or 125 or 435 like I had my first year teaching, where every student has a place of personal connection in that classroom. Maybe it's a picture in their cubby, maybe it's some poster board that the whole class gets to decorate, but if they get frustrated, they get to go and have a comfort zone in the classroom to just decompress for a moment. It's not just your space. We are teachers and primarily extroverts, and we expect our students to be extroverts, but they're not all extroverts. So we need to find a way for them to have a comfort zone in your classroom. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and I do this for a couple of reasons. One is to model for you how to introduce your students to who you are. The other is so that you and I get a little bit more of a personal connection on who I am as a person and why who I am as a person made me the person to be able to go forward and develop STEAM and continue to work with teachers around the country to further develop STEAM based on who everybody else is in my network. I was primarily raised by my grandparents. My mother was born with severe disabilities, physically and mentally. She's borderline Asperger's versus autistic. So I have always felt like I've raised my mother. My grandfather was very much a strict engineer. He was the type that said, jump, and we all said, how high? He had a very limited range of emotions, and he was very academically advanced. I very much get my ability to think through problems and solve things and persevere academically from him. My grandmother, polar opposite. Youngest of 16 children, completely involved in her family and having fun, very interested in the home ec world, always just really vivacious and an incredibly vibrant personality. And I believe I get some of my personality from my grandmother. This is a picture of her in Puerto Rico as a young lady saying to her mother, this beautiful dress that my older sisters made me for my debutante ball, I'm not going. By the way, tomorrow I'm going to Manhattan and I'm going to lead my own life. She's very independent, and I certainly get my independence from her. The left is a picture of my brother. He was born when I was 13 years old, and he has Asperger's as well. Coming from a perspective of my mother and my brother both having severe emotional, intellectual, and physical disabilities made me very much more aware of special needs people and that they are constant problem solvers and engineers in their own right. Also, I have 2 children of my own. This picture is them when they were young. They're now almost adults. My daughter and my son were both in the gifted programs, and growing up, they never really learned how to study. It wasn't until my daughter became a senior in high school that she hit calculus and failed calculus. I thought that was a wonderful thing to have happened to her. Most people don't think it's wonderful when their kids fail a course. I knew my daughter needed to learn how to study, how to struggle, and how to accept being defeated at different times and still persevere. So those are things that are also incorporated into STEAM. How people learn to persevere, and how people who are normally seen as having less with learning disabilities and physical disabilities actually are so much more adaptable to the learning structure than those kids who've never had to struggle. There are moments in our life that last less than a minute, but that impact our lives forever. I'd like to share one of those moments with you. My grandfather was an engineer who worked in the city and did not want his children raised in the city. So we bought a farm for my grandmother and her children and us as grandchildren. And we learned a lot about real life and growing things and building things on that farm. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother, being the youngest of 16, was regularly going back to Puerto Rico to help her elder brothers and sisters through end stages of life. My grandfather said, let's build Grandma a house down there so she has a place of her own since she's down there so often. Go interview your grandmother and design her house. It was incredibly empowering for me as a child that that house will last long after I do. When we were building that house, my grandfather turned to me and said something he very rarely said to anybody. He said, "You're really smart." And I said, "Wow, I'm really smart? Thanks, Grandpa." And he said, "Yeah, you're going to make a great engineer's wife someday." So when I went to go to college, there was no money for me to become an engineer. I had to choose a major that I felt comfortable with, that I could also work 30 hours a week to put myself through school. That was an incredibly important impact on my life. I did not get to pursue what I wanted to pursue, but I was still going to find a way to pursue what I did. He, being an engineer, made me want to be an engineer, but I also had a stepfather who was a portrait artist, and I had a very keen interest in the arts. So when I had to choose what major to go into, I chose clothing and textiles design. It allowed me to pursue chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, and artistic design. Make sure you show your children a slide that says, whatever you got coming for me, I can handle it. So I show them this to say I worked with 140 people over 7 divisions of a company that I managed in a country under a different language with regular military coups. If I can work with all of these people, I got the 25 of you covered. Show them something that you've done in your life that lets them know you can cover what they're doing. When I was working as a clothing and textiles major and as a vice president of this company, I was away from my children regularly. I decided I was going to go into education to be on the same schedule as my children. In order to do that, I couldn't still be a fashion designer. So I decided I wanted to design houses. And I went up to a general contractor and I said, I'd like to design houses for you. And he said, great, are you an architect? I said, no, I'm a fashion designer. And he said, well, how's that going to work? And I said, let me prove to you that I can do this. And I didn't let the fact that I didn't have that magic piece of paper stop me. For the first project, I worked for very little money, and I proved to him that I could design houses. Because to me, designing houses is easier than designing clothing. You're dealing with flat planes and hard structures versus guessing ahead of time what somebody might want to buy that's mostly an aesthetic and a comfort choice. Houses have a little bit more structure and intelligence about going forward into what people are going to want in them. So I now can say that I've helped redesign historical structures, as well as the one in the lower left I designed from scratch. Again, those are all going to stay in this world much past my physical being is. There's a sense of empowerment there in being able to design things like that. So don't limit yourself or your students to what's in your comfort zone. Limit yourself only to where your mind and your students' minds can bring you. I've also done some interior design work, and I'd like to take a moment to talk very specifically about these 2 pieces. The piece on the left is my son's bedroom. He's very much an introvert, and I can't sit across the table from him and discuss something he might have done wrong. He locks up, and we have those students in our classrooms too. So his bedroom became a place of comfort zone, and we would go in that little bed area and sit down and talk about things that we needed to talk about where he felt we were in his world instead of sitting at my kitchen table. Make sure there's a place for that. with your own students in their classroom. If they have a comfort zone where they want to sit underneath maybe a sheer curtain in their desk and read a book and do a worksheet, there's nothing to say that they're not being academic in doing that. Or in the corner of the classroom, have bean bags and a little comfort area there. These kids don't get a chance to have a planning period. We know they'll go into the bathroom and lock themselves in for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Give them a comfort zone in your space where that's acceptable to be themselves and have some downtime. The other picture is a mosaic that I did in my own home. I did that because in my teaching career, I had a very unfortunate incident where I did not connect well enough to a student in my classroom and they attacked me. I was physically and emotionally down for almost a year. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to set foot in a classroom again. I didn't know if I'd ever teach again. So this was my catharsis work. Please be aware that kids don't just put tacks on chairs anymore, and you need to connect to each child. And we'll talk more later about how we do that and how we incorporate that into STEAM. So much of who I am as a person led me to be the one to develop STEAM. And now there's networks of people all around the world working on STEAM, and it's so exciting because the more influences, the more voices, the more STEAM's going to take off and be amazing. So in that first week, we can offer a very simple project that becomes an introductory to STEAM project. The kids should make their own nameplates. So think about the STEAM of this nameplate. The science is the mediums. Did we choose thin paper? No, we chose a cardstock because it was going to be more durable. And what's the medium of what went on that? We chose something like a deep marker that can be vibrant versus a light pencil, so it can be seen from across the room. So there's a science there to what we did. The technology, the kids had to cut it a certain size. They could decide on the shape. They had to use certain tools to do that, rulers and scissors, and be able to function technologically. The engineering, they had to design it themselves. This student chose not only just to put their name, but a little introductory sentence. There's an engineering aspect. There's an originality there. The arts, obviously there's an artistic layout, but also the language arts. It's primarily a word-based sign. So is it clear? Does it convey the message that it needs to be conveyed? Does it engage people on a psychological and social level of the social arts? And yes, is it aesthetically pleasing? And the mathematics, it had to take, their name had to take up a certain percentage of space, and it had to be laid out with rulers and some rigidity of structure. So there's mathematics in that project too. And all of that is based on a nameplate. So to recap what we've covered in this video, you have a basic overview of what this course is going to entail, a very brief synopsis of why STEAM, and a little bit on how you can introduce yourself to your students, they can introduce themselves to each other and to you, and how to set the basis that you have a friendly and functionally literate classroom to go forward with to teach STEAM. I'd like you now to go and look into your folders, and I'm going to ask you for some specific information on you. What is your specific career title? What exactly do you teach or are you an administrator of? What is your school affiliation? What are your personal interests and hobbies so I can know a little bit more about you? And what is your particular interest in STEAM, and why are you so interested in becoming a certified teacher, and what can we do to help you?